Boy, I have to give some props to Vice, specifically their motherboard imprint. Vice used to do some good work, and it seems that they still do at least some, because they have got a what appears to be a scoop about the Uvalde city and the police department, and presumably, I think also the school board, or what they call the independent school district, or something like that, whatever they call them in Texas. Fighting in court these requests to release body cam footage from the many, many cops, the multitude of police officers from multiple agencies, but I guess in this case they're only trying to block their own, since they are the party here, the litigant, I believe is the correct term. They don't want the body cam footage released so that they can be held accountable for their actions, or rather inactions, which resulted in the deaths of however many kids were killed on that day. It seems like everybody's already forgotten that there was a active shooter who was chased by the police into a school. Okay, they were chasing him. He wasn't at a school. He was on the run from the cops. The cops chased him. He ran into the school, and then the cops didn't follow him in. The cops chased him in there, surrounded the building so that he couldn't come out, and then just sort of left him in there, locked up with all the kids that he could ever want to kill. And, later on, it seems there actually were quite a few cops, not only outside the building, trying to arrest and detain any parents or other bystanders who would try and go in to assist or rescue the children who were under threat from this active shooter. But there were also cops inside the school, too, who still did nothing to try and fight and stop and detain this shooter the way that they tried to stop and detain and handcuff the parents who were concerned about their children. And so, since we know that they didn't take down the shooter, that in fact it was the Border Patrol, of all people, who showed up and eventually took down this mass murderer, it would be quite interesting to know what the cops were doing for that entire time. It was like 2 hours, I think. And so, why is it that the Uvalde cops and the city don't want this body cam footage released, and that they don't want this other evidence that they have released to the public? Well, it's because it will be highly embarrassing. They actually put that in their filing. That is a quote that Vice put in their piece, and I will link to it in the description below. The Uvalde cops are afraid of being embarrassed because they're a bunch of cowards. Because they let kids die, and now their failure is being used to justify, the latest gun control push, which, all things considered, is this much of a gun control law that they're trying to push through the Senate? No, not really. If you're a gun control advocate, you're going to say, hey, this is a total BS bill. It's toothless, doesn't do anything. But if you're someone who believes in the Second Amendment, it is still an infringement. It is still, even if it's not, as bad as the kind of crap that they usually propose, it still is completely insulting, because restricting the rights of individuals to any degree has no bearing on the safety of these poor kids who were abandoned by the police. And in fact, the actions taken by the police got a lot more kids killed, because if there were no police there, then good Samaritans, angry parents, could have gone in, gotten their kids, rescued other kids, potentially taken down the shooter. But no, the police made sure that guy had free rein. They chased him in there to begin with. He was not going to the school, as far as we know. He had already killed somebody else, and he was on the run, and he crashed his truck in a ditch in front of the school, and then he ran in there. And once he was in there, the school was surrounded with cops. He couldn't get out, and so all he had left to do was to murder children. And nobody on the outside who wanted to go in and rescue the kids could, because the cops were not going to let them. And so if this body cam footage was released, I think it would be more than just embarrassing. I think that there would be lynch mobs which formed to go and get justice for these children and punish the police who not only didn't help, but actively helped the shooting. I'm not saying that that was intentional. I'm not saying that this was a conspiracy, but I'm saying that that is in effect what they did. That was the effect of their actions. They made the situation worse. They got more kids killed. Frankly, if they weren't around, there might have been 0 kids killed. That's a counterfactual. I can't prove that. But certainly, when you look at all the evidence that we have already, even with all of the evidence that they're trying to block from coming to light, even with that evidence in the dark and hidden from us, that's still how it looks. And so if they're trying this hard to block the body cam footage and all the other evidence that they want to hide from coming to light, do you think that that evidence is going to make them look better or worse? Do you think it's going to make what I'm saying more plausible or less plausible? My guess is that if I were just crazy and it was a total misunderstanding, and, sure, on the surface, it looks like the police officers made this situation much worse, got a bunch more kids killed, focused all of their efforts on trying to stop people from helping rather than trying to stop the murderer, well, then the cops would be eager to release that footage. If there was footage of them, heroically trying to do everything they could, even if they fell short and didn't quite make it, but if it showed them trying to be heroic and doing what needed to be done, they would be the first ones releasing voluntarily the body cam footage. They would be leaking their own body cam footage just to exonerate themselves. But they're not. They're fighting to keep it hidden, secret, forever, because it's, quote, highly embarrassing. And we're supposed to give up our guns because of cowards like this? That's what we're led to believe. Personally, I find that hard to take. And I think that the people of Texas, at the very least, find it hard to take as well. Even though you would think, oh, well, this happened in Texas. That's where the emotion should be highest. That's why, Texas, a senator from a state like Texas is going along with this, this new gun consensus thing. Oh, we should incentivize red flag laws. We should take away guns if your crazy ex-wife says, oh, he's a bad guy. You need to take away all his guns. Go do a pre-dawn raid and bust in his door. And yes, he's armed, so when you bust in his door, he's probably going to try and shoot you. And if he does shoot you, shoot back and kill him. We need to promote states passing these laws, if you ask Senator John Cornyn of Texas. But when he went to his state party's convention today, what happened? He was booed off the stage. People took memorabilia, I guess you'd call it, of his stuff that had his name on it and threw it in the trash. None of them wanted to be associated with him because he is just another Lindsey Graham. This bill reminds me of the Gang of Eight, but for guns. I don't know how much it'll really make, it'll take for people to wake up about people like Lindsey Graham or John Cornyn. But hopefully this will be it. Somebody like Susan Collins, I can forgive. I've talked about Susan Collins in the past. She doesn't claim to be, a right-wing person by any means. She doesn't claim to be conservative. Nobody thinks of her that way. She is, a New England Republican who's able to win in what, for typically has been a very deep blue state. Although, Maine is a little more competitive than it has been in the last few years. Paul LePage is sort of a Trumpy sort of Republican, and he's shown that he's been able to win there statewide, although not nearly as consistently as someone like Susan Collins. So, there's a big difference between someone like Susan Collins, who is who she claims to be, and somebody like John Cornyn or Lindsey Graham, who, runs in a deep red state. These are guys in the deep South, Texas and South Carolina. And yet, they vote like they're from blue states, or like they're from New England. They act like New England Republicans. And there is a place for New England Republicans, because, New England is just such a far left place that the right wing of New England, if you want to call it that, is still going to be left of center. And so it would be understandable for them to get behind gun control. But if you're supposedly on the right and you're in a right-wing state, there's no place for them. And I don't know why I'm blanking. I guess it was Tom Tillis, North Carolina. There's a couple other people. There was nobody who shocked me, seeing them sign on to this bill. But again, this bill goes back to the Uvalde shooting, which is being covered up. And, we've already moved on. We're already on to the stupid gun control debate. And so we've forgotten what the original motivation for this was. If there was no Uvalde shooting, there would be no push for gun control. But hey, since this is the basis for us trying to pass a law, something as important as a law, shouldn't we learn the facts? Shouldn't we know what's going on? No, because, the media's already gotten their emotional effect out of the Uvalde shooting, and so it doesn't matter what really happened at this point. Just like with the Vegas shooting. Trump banned bump stocks after the Vegas shooting. And so nobody's ever going to talk about the Vegas shooting again. Well, they got what they wanted. And Trump gave them exactly what they wanted. Because Trump is a snake. Because he's a bad person. Which I have thought from the beginning. I praised Trump when I thought he did some good things. But deep down, at his core, he was a bad person. Bad in a different way than other politicians. He had merits, which other politicians did not. But that doesn't change the fact that he was, at his core, fundamentally a snake. He's very happy to stab his own supporters in the back when he feels like he can get away with it and when it won't hurt him. And people like John Cornyn and Lindsey Graham, they think the same way. John Cornyn and Lindsey Graham know, hey, we just won re-election. We could do whatever we want because in 6 years, you idiots won't remember. You won't care. I'll just talk about, oh my gosh, what if a Democrat wins? You gotta vote for me again. I love you. I'm fighting for you. It's a game Lindsey Graham plays every 6 years. It's the game that John Cornyn plays. They all play the game because they only have to win every 6 years. And you know what, John Cornyn, he's a pretty old guy. He might not even run again. If I were him, I'm sure he's much richer than I'll ever be in my life. And I'm sure he's got more money than he could ever spend. So he's probably at the stage of his life where he's like, you know what? I don't care what the voters think, because I'm going to retire after this term anyway. As the senator from Texas, who is now, a part of this big cabal trying to do whatever they can, get away with, to strip away our Second Amendment rights, you would think that old John Cornyn would be out there trying to get to the bottom of this Uvalde shooting himself. You'd think he'd be down there if he really cared about the kids that much, so much so that he's willing to betray his own voters and try to go after their guns. If he's willing to go, because again, that's a betrayal. Even he would have to recognize that. If he's willing to go that far, just for the sake of these kids, you would think he'd be going he'd at least go as far as to try and get to the bottom of what happened to them. And so, I think at the end of the day, what will end up being the moral of this story in Uvalde is that we need to disarm the police and rearm the public. The police, the power differential between the police and the public, between the police who wanted to enable evil, who wanted to permit this rampage. They were all decked out. They had their plate they had their plate armor on. They're walking around with rifles. They were all like swatted up. And then you had ordinary parents, unarmed, in the school parking lot, being handcuffed, thrown to the ground, while their kids were inside being slaughtered. Clearly, if the power differential had been reversed, if it had been the parents who, comparatively, were better armed and had control of the situation, rather than these treacherous police, we would have had a much different result. Things would have worked out much better. And at the end of the day, you can always trust yourself and your neighbor much more than you can trust the cops. Because you and your neighbor actually have a vested interest in the safety of your community. The police don't. And that's understandable. You know, the police, at the end of the day, we hear it all the time from cops. Their job is to make it home safe to their wife and kids. They've got a family at home. And they want to get back to them. And they're a bad father if they don't come home. If they end up in a body bag. They get themselves killed. They are a bad dad. That's true. And so, let the fathers of your own community use the same incentive and the same motivation to actually protect it. These Uvalde cops, they went in and got their own kids out. Those of them who had a kid in there, they got their kid out. But they left everybody else's kid behind. If you put your hand, or especially, if you put your life, or the lives of your children in the hands of the state, they'll crush you like a bug. We've learned that lesson time and time again throughout human history. The only person or people who are going to protect you and your family and your community is you. It's not going to be them. Most of the time, they have nothing but contempt for you. You're a burden, an obstacle, an annoyance. That's how these cops treated these parents. These cops were sitting outside, biding their time, and just waiting for the situation to be over so they could go home. And these parents just kept screaming at them about, oh, my baby, oh, I want to go help my kids, save them. And these cops, they were just annoyed, they had it up to here with it. So they threw down. They cuffed him. They detained him. And they told him to shut up, sit down, and wait for it all to be over. We've got the situation under control. And this is the result. So the solution here for the state of Texas is they need to defund and disarm their police and take that money and put it into subsidizing cheap guns and ammo for the public and offering free training, particularly pistol training, so that it's something that people have on them. Train them how to deal with active shooters. Do all this for free. Just put all these sleeper cells, essentially. Think of them like undercover agents across into the community. So that when something like this happens, someone who wants to spring into action and actually help is in a position to do so, rather than relying on people who don't want to do shit. So with that said, I will see you folks back here tomorrow.